Zara Chen moved through the vast halls of the Galactic Council archives like a shadow. Her human footsteps echoed softly against the crystal floors that stretched for miles beneath the domed ceiling of Nexus Prime. The other workers, mostly tall blue-skinned Zenthari and insect-like Kythera, barely looked at her as she passed. To them, she was just another human. Nothing special. Nothing important. She carried a data pad filled with her daily assignments. Ancient records needed sorting. Old languages needed translating. It was work that most beings found boring, but Zara loved it. Every old file told a story. Every forgotten language held secrets from the past. The archive section she worked in today was older than most. The air tasted of metal and age. Dust particles floated in the pale blue light that came from panels in the walls. Zara found her assigned workstation and began pulling up files on her terminal. Most of the records were standard stuff. Trade agreements from 1,000 years ago, weather reports from dead planets, supply lists for military ships that no longer existed. But then something caught her eye, a file marked with symbols she had never seen before. The text was heavily encrypted, but pieces of it seemed to glow on her screen. She leaned closer and touched the surface. The moment her finger made contact, the symbols shifted and changed. For just a second, she could read them. The Voidwalker returns when the stars align in terror. Zara jerked her hand back. The text returned to its encrypted form. She looked around to see if anyone had noticed, but the archive was nearly empty. Only the soft humming of computers and the distant sound of footsteps in other sections. She tried to access the file again, but it was locked. The security level was far above her clearance, but something about those words stuck in her mind. The Voidwalker. She had never heard that name before, but it felt familiar somehow. Her work shift continued normally until the afternoon assembly. All workers were required to attend these meetings where the council leaders would make announcements. Zara usually tried to sit in the back, but today the main hall was more crowded than usual. The Supreme Hierarch Vexthul stood at the center podium. He was a Drakmari, one of the reptilian species that had been council members for over 4,000 years. His scales were dark green and his yellow eyes seemed to look right through people. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. Today we celebrate another year of peace and prosperity under council guidance, Vexthul announced. Our wisdom has kept the galaxy stable for millennia. Polite applause filled the hall. Zara clapped along with everyone else, though she wondered if the peace was really as perfect as they claimed. There had been rumors of problems at the galaxy's edge. Ships going missing, strange signals from empty space. However, Vexthul continued, his voice growing colder, some among us seem to think they can access information beyond their station. Zara felt her blood turn to ice. Several council members were looking in her direction. How did they know about the file she had tried to open? Archives Worker 7749, Vexthul called out. Stand and identify yourself. Zara's legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. Zara Chen, sir. Ah, yes, the human. Vexthul's voice dripped with contempt. Tell me, Chen, what makes you think your primitive mind can understand records that were sealed by your betters? Heat rose in Zara's cheeks. I was just doing my assigned work, sir. I didn't mean to access anything I shouldn't have. Your assigned work. Vexthul laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your species has been part of this council for barely 2 centuries. In galactic terms, you are infants. Children playing with tools you don't understand. More laughter rippled through the chamber, though some beings looked uncomfortable. Zara noticed that Dr. Morkan, an elderly Zenthari scholar, was frowning at the hierarch's words. Your mongrel human heritage shows in everything you do, Vexthul went on. Chaotic, unpredictable, unable to follow simple rules. Perhaps we should reconsider whether humans deserve access to our sacred archives at all. The words hit Zara like physical blows. She wanted to defend herself, to point out that she had one of the best records in the archive division, that she had translated languages other workers couldn't even recognize. But she knew speaking up would only make things worse. Sit down, Chen, Vexthul commanded, and remember your place. Zara sat down quickly, her face burning with shame and anger. Around her, the other workers avoided looking at her. The meeting continued, but she heard none of it. All she could think about was the way Vexthul had said mongrel heritage like she was some kind of animal. After the assembly ended, Zara returned to her workstation. But when she tried to log into her terminal, something strange happened. Files she had never seen before began opening on their own. Ancient security protocols were activating without her input. For a moment, streams of data flowed across her screen faster than any being could read. Then everything went back to normal. Zara stared at her screen in confusion. Had she imagined it? She tried to bring back whatever had just happened, but the terminal responded normally to her commands. Interesting. She spun around to find Dr. Morkan standing behind her. The old Zenthari's silver hair was pulled back in traditional braids, and his kind blue eyes studied her with curiosity rather than judgment. "Dr. Morkan," Zara said, standing up quickly. "I didn't hear you coming. Few do at my age." He smiled gently. "I wanted to apologize for what happened in the assembly. Vexthul's words were unkind and unfair. Thank you, sir. But maybe he's right. Maybe humans don't belong here." "Nonsense." Dr. Morkan moved closer to her workstation. "I've been watching your work for months, Miss Chen. Your translation skills are remarkable. You have insights that others miss." He paused, looking at her screen. "Tell me, have you ever experienced unusual reactions from Council technology?" Zara hesitated. Should she tell him about the file she had briefly been able to read? About the way her terminal had just acted on its own? Dr. Morkan had always been kind to her, but he was still a council member. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Dr. Morkan studied her face. "Perhaps nothing. But if anything strange does happen, please let me know. There are things about this galaxy's history that even the Council doesn't fully understand." He walked away, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts and her terminal. She looked at the screen again, but it showed only her normal work files. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something that connected to the mysterious word she had seen earlier. The Voidwalker. Who was that? And why did the name make her feel like she was standing at the edge of a great cliff, about to discover something that would change everything? As the day shift ended and the archive grew quiet, Zara made a decision. She was going to find out more about that encrypted file, no matter what the consequences might be. The Council thought humans were too primitive to understand their secrets. Maybe it was time to prove them wrong. 3 days had passed since the assembly, and Zara couldn't stop thinking about the encrypted file. Every time she tried to access it during her regular work hours, the system blocked her. But late at night, when most of the archive workers had gone home, she found ways to stay behind. Tonight was no different. The archive hummed with quiet energy as cleaning drones moved through the distant sections. Zara sat at her workstation, her fingers dancing across the terminal controls. She had learned a few tricks over the years, ways to make her access attempts look like routine maintenance checks. She brought up the encrypted file again. The strange symbols filled her screen, but this time she didn't touch the display right away. Instead, she studied the patterns. There was something familiar about the way they were arranged, like a language she had once known but forgotten. When she finally placed her hand on the screen, the symbols shifted again. More text became readable this time. Kalen the Voidwalker came from the darkness between stars. His mind could touch machines as easily as flesh touches flesh. The great fleets of the Council fell before him like wheat before the harvest blade. Zara's heart pounded. This wasn't just any old record. This was talking about someone who had fought the Council. Someone who had won. But when? The file dates were corrupted, but the language pattern suggested it was very old, maybe 3,000 years or more. She tried to read further, but the text faded back to its encrypted state. Her head began to hurt, like pressure building behind her eyes. She rubbed her temples and noticed something strange. The pain felt almost like the sensation she got when learning a new language. Like her brain was stretching to fit new information. A soft chime from her terminal made her look up. Several new files had appeared in her access queue, files she hadn't requested, files that shouldn't have been available to someone at her security level. She opened the first one. It was a battle report from ancient times written in classical Zenthari. The text described a conflict at the edge of what was then Council space. A single human ship had appeared without warning and destroyed an entire patrol fleet. The survivors reported that their weapons wouldn't work properly, that their computers seemed to turn against them. The second file was stranger. It was written in multiple languages, some of which Zara had never seen before. But somehow she could understand parts of it. The document described experiments on something called quantum consciousness interface, the ability of certain minds to connect directly with electronic systems and even Alter the basic laws of physics in small areas. Impossible, Zara whispered to herself. But even as she said it, she remembered the way her terminal had acted on its own 3 days ago. The way the encrypted text had responded to her touch. She opened a third file and gasped. It was a genetic analysis report. The header was in ancient council script, but she could read it clearly now. Analysis of Void Walker bloodline markers. Security level, absolute. The report detailed specific DNA sequences that appeared in some humans. Sequences that were connected to enhanced neural development and something called reality interface capability. According to the data, these genetic markers appeared in less than 1% of the human population. The report recommended immediate monitoring and containment of any humans showing these traits. Zara's hands shook as she read. Without thinking, she accessed the archive's medical database and ran a search on her own genetic profile. The results made her feel dizzy. She had the markers. All of them. Miss Chen. Zara spun around so fast her chair rolled backward. Dr. Morkan stood at the entrance to her work area, his expression concerned. Dr. Morkan, I was just finishing some late work. The elderly Zenthari walked closer, his eyes taking in the files displayed on her screen. His face grew pale when he saw the genetic analysis report. "Oh, my dear child," he said softly. "What have you found?" "I don't understand any of this," Zara said, though that wasn't entirely true anymore. She was beginning to understand more than she wanted to. Dr. Morkan pulled up a chair next to her workstation. "I was afraid this day might come," he said. "I've been studying human genetics for decades, Miss Chen, looking for patterns that the Council would prefer to ignore." "What patterns?" "Your species is far more remarkable than the Council admits. Humans adapt and evolve faster than any other known race. Your brains form new connections constantly, and in rare cases," he gestured at her screen, "in very rare cases, those brains can do things that seem impossible." Zara looked at the files again. "The Voidwalker, Kalen, he was real?" "According to the oldest records, yes. A human who appeared in Council space about 3 millennia ago. He had abilities that our scientists still can't explain. The power to interface directly with any technology, to adapt to new situations instantly, to see possibilities that others missed. And he fought the Council?" Dr. Morkan nodded grimly. "He didn't just fight them. He defeated them completely, dismantled their entire military structure in less than 2 years. The Council of that time was far more aggressive than today's government. They conquered species by force, enslaved entire worlds. What happened to him? He vanished. Some say he went back to Earth. Others believe he traveled beyond the galaxy's edge. But before he left, the records suggest he did something to ensure his legacy would continue." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "The genetic markers, exactly. It appears he somehow modified certain human bloodlines, left behind the potential for others like him to appear when they were needed." As Dr. Morkan spoke, Zara felt another wave of pressure in her head. But this time, instead of pain, it brought clarity. She looked at her terminal screen and suddenly understood how to access files she had never seen before. Security protocols that should have blocked her seemed to open like doors at her approach. "Dr. Morkan," she said slowly, "I think something is happening to me." The old scholar watched as Zara's fingers moved across the terminal controls, without her consciously directing them. New files opened. Ancient databases responded to commands she wasn't even sure she was giving. "The awakening," he whispered. "I theorized this might happen, but to actually see it." On Zara's screen, a new document appeared. This one was different from the others. Instead of text, it showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with dozens of points marked in pulsing light. "What is that?" Zara asked. Dr. Morkan studied the display with growing excitement. "If I'm correct, those are locations. Places where Kalen left something behind. Facilities or databases that only his descendants could access." Zara touched one of the points on the map. Immediately, her screen filled with technical specifications for technology she had never imagined. Ships that could fold space. Weapons that could disrupt the quantum foundations of matter. Defensive systems that seemed to bend reality itself. "This is incredible," she breathed. "But why? Why leave all this behind?" Dr. Morkan's expression grew serious. Because he knew that someday, the galaxy would face a threat that would require humanity's unique gifts to overcome. As if summoned by his words, alarm bells suddenly rang throughout the archive complex. Emergency lights bathed the halls in red, An automated voice echoed from speakers. All personnel report to emergency stations. Unknown vessels have been detected at the galaxy's outer rim. All personnel report to emergency stations. Zara and Dr. Morkan looked at each other. The old scholar's face was grave. It seems, he said quietly, that someday has arrived. On Zara's screen, the galactic map pulsed with increasing urgency. Somewhere in her mind, she could feel something vast and patient beginning to stir. The legacy of Kalen the Voidwalker was awakening, and with it the true potential of humanity. But she was also aware that others would not be pleased by these developments. The Council had worked for thousands of years to suppress the truth about human capabilities. They would not give up their control easily. The real test was about to begin. The emergency alarm continued to wail as Zara and Dr. Morkan made their way through the archive complex. Other workers rushed past them, heading for the designated safety areas. But Zara found herself walking in the opposite direction, toward the central command hub. "Where are you going?" Dr. Morkan asked, hurrying to keep up with her. "I need to see what's happening," Zara replied. She wasn't sure why she felt so certain about this, but something deep inside her was pulling her toward the command center. The hub was chaos when they arrived. Council officers shouted orders while technicians worked frantically at their stations. Massive display screens showed the galaxy's outer rim, where dozens of dark shapes were moving inward at impossible speeds. Commander Thexara, head of internal security, stood at the center of the room. She was a tall, lean Kithara with forearms and compound eyes that could track multiple targets at once. When she saw Zara enter, those eyes fixed on her with suspicious intensity. "What is an archive worker doing here?" Thexara demanded. "She has clearance to observe," Dr. Morkan said quickly. "I'm conducting research on historical parallels to current events." It was a weak excuse, but the commander was too busy to argue. She turned back to the tactical displays. "Report," she snapped at her officers. "Unknown fleet, approximately 200 vessels," came the reply. They appeared simultaneously at 17 different points along the rim. "Their ships don't match any known design." Zara stared at the display screens. The alien vessels were dark and twisted, like metal that had been grown rather than built. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Have they responded to communication attempts?" Thexara asked. "No response to any frequency. They're just coming toward us. At their current speed, they'll reach the outer colonies in 6 days." As Zara watched the approaching fleet, she felt that strange pressure in her head again. But this time it was accompanied by images, flashes of memory that weren't her own. She saw vast battles in the darkness between stars. She saw entire worlds consumed by shadows. And she saw a figure standing alone against the darkness, his hands weaving light into reality itself. "The Devourers," she whispered without meaning to. Every person in the command center turned to look at her. Commander Thexara's compound eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" I don't know why I said that." Zara's mind reeled. The word had come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Dr. Morkan stepped closer to her. "Zara, are you seeing something?" Before she could answer, alerts began sounding from multiple stations. "Commander," one officer called out. "The intruder fleet just increased speed. They'll reach the outer colonies in 3 days, not 6. How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. Their acceleration rate defies our understanding of physics." Zara closed her eyes and let the strange pressure in her head build. Images flooded her mind more clearly now. She saw the dark fleet as if she were standing on one of their ships. The creatures inside weren't quite alive and weren't quite machines. They consumed entire civilizations, breaking down matter and energy to fuel their endless expansion. "They're not from our galaxy," she said, her voice strange and distant. "They come from the void between galaxies. They've been traveling for millions of years, consuming everything in their path." Commander Thexara grabbed Zara's arm with one of her 4 hands. "How could you possibly know that?" "I can see them," Zara replied, still lost in the visions. "Their ships are alive. They feed on quantum energy. They turn planets into gray dust." "This is ridiculous," Thexara snarled. "A human archive worker cannot possibly have intelligence about an unknown alien fleet." She activated her communication device. "Security teams to the command hub. I want this human detained for questioning." Dr. Morkan moved to stand between Zara and the commander. "Wait, consider what she just told you. Information that no one else has been able to gather. Perhaps you should listen instead of arrest. Stand aside, Doctor. This human is clearly unstable. But as the security teams entered the command hub, something unexpected happened. Zara opened her eyes and they were glowing with soft blue light. Every electronic system in the room began responding to her presence. Displays changed without input. Computer systems accessed files on their own. The lights flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. Impossible, breathed one of the technicians. Zara walked toward the main tactical display, and the security officers found they couldn't move to stop her. Their weapons wouldn't respond to their commands. Their communication devices went silent. The Devourers have faced humanity before, Zara said, her voice carrying strange harmonics. 3,000 years ago at the edge of what was then council space. One man stood against them and won. She placed her hands on the tactical display and suddenly the screen showed events from the distant past. A single human ship facing a Devourer fleet. The dark vessels crumbling as their quantum foundations were rewritten by pure will. Kalen the Void Walker, Dr. Morkan whispered. He didn't just defeat the Council's armies, Zara continued, her consciousness now flowing through every system in the room. He was preparing for this. For their return. Everything he did was to ensure that when the Devourers came back, humanity would be ready. Commander Thexara stared at the display in shock. You're saying this human from 3 millennia ago knew about the current invasion? Time moves differently in the void between galaxies, Zara replied. He could see the possibilities, the potential futures. He knew that only human consciousness could adapt fast enough to counter the Devourer technology. The security officers were backing away now, their weapons useless in hands that wouldn't obey their commands. Several of the council officers were praying in their native languages. Dr. Morkan approached Zara carefully. My dear, can you tell us how to fight them? Zara turned to him, her glowing eyes sad and ancient. The council has spent 3,000 years suppressing human potential. They've kept us weak because they feared what Kalen showed them. But now, she gestured, and the tactical display changed again. This time it showed human colonies throughout council space. On dozens of worlds, people were looking up at the sky with expressions of wonder and fear. Their eyes were beginning to glow. The awakening is spreading, Zara said. Every human with the genetic markers is beginning to remember what we once were, what we can become. Commander Thexara found her voice again. This is a security nightmare. Humans developing unknown abilities across the galaxy? We have to contain this situation immediately. You can't, Dr. Morkan said quietly. This isn't something you can arrest or suppress. This is evolution in action. As if to prove his point, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Humans in council facilities were demonstrating impossible abilities. Pilots were interfacing directly with their ships. Engineers were rebuilding technology with their bare hands. Scientists were solving equations that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. And in the depths of space, the Devourer fleet continued its approach. But now, scattered throughout the galaxy, points of light were beginning to respond. Ancient facilities left behind by Kalen were activating. Ships that had been hidden for 3 millennia were powering up. Zara stepped back from the display, the glow fading from her eyes. She swayed on her feet and Dr. Morkan caught her arm. Are you all right? I'm different, she said softly. I can feel them now. All the other humans who are awakening. We're connected somehow, like parts of a larger mind. Commander Thexara was speaking urgently into her communication device, but her equipment was still not responding properly. I need immediate contact with the Supreme Hierarch. This situation requires the highest level of response. Dr. Morkan looked at Zara with a mixture of awe and concern. What happens now, my dear? Zara looked back at the tactical display, where the Devourer fleet continued its relentless approach. Now we find out if 3,000 years of preparation was enough. The real test is about to begin. In the depths of her awakening mind, she could feel Kalen's presence like an echo across time. He had given humanity the tools they would need. But using those tools, surviving what was coming, would be up to them. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could really do when they stopped holding back. The next 48 hours changed everything. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as more humans began displaying abilities that defied explanation. On the mining world of Kepler 7, human workers were reshaping metal with their minds. On the research station at Vega Prime, Human scientists were solving quantum equations by touching computer interfaces directly, and the Council was terrified. Zara sat in a holding cell deep within Nexus Prime security complex. They hadn't been able to stop her abilities completely, but special dampening fields made it harder for her to access electronic systems. Through the reinforced walls, she could hear heated arguments between Council members about what to do with her. Dr. Morkan had been allowed to visit her once. He brought news that made her both hopeful and worried. The Council is splitting apart, he told her through the cell's communication system. Half of them want you and every awakened human eliminated immediately. The other half thinks you might be the key to stopping the Devourer fleet. What about the Devourers? Zara asked. How much time do we have? They'll reach the outer colonies in 18 hours. Our best fleets are moving to intercept, but Dr. Morkan's expression was grim. The preliminary encounters haven't gone well. Council weapons seem to have no effect on their ships. Zara closed her eyes and reached out with her expanding consciousness. Even through the dampening field, she could feel the other awakened humans across the galaxy. Their minds were bright points of light in the darkness, growing stronger by the hour. Dr. Morkan, she said softly, I need you to get a message to Counselor Ylandra, the Altarian representative. Why her specifically? Because she's the only council member who voted against the suppression protocols 3 centuries ago. She believed humans should be allowed to develop naturally. Zara had accessed that information during her brief connection to the Central Archives. Tell her I know where Kalen hid his ships. Dr. Morkan's eyes widened. Ships? How many ships? Enough to matter. But only awakened humans can operate them, and the Council is going to have to choose whether they trust us or watch the galaxy burn. After Dr. Morkan left, Zara was alone with her thoughts and the growing pressure of her abilities. The dampening field couldn't completely suppress what she was becoming. If anything, fighting against it was making her stronger. She was deep in meditation, reaching out to connect with other awakened humans, when alarms began blaring throughout the security complex. Through her cell's single window, she could see explosions lighting up the space around Nexus Prime. The Devourers had arrived ahead of schedule. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red as Council security forces ran past her cell. She could hear Commander Thexara shouting orders. All human personnel are to be confined immediately. No exceptions. But Zara could feel that it was too late for containment. Across the station, awakened humans were breaking free of whatever restraints had been placed on them. Their abilities were growing exponentially under the pressure of the crisis. Her cell door suddenly hissed open. Counselor Ylandra stood in the doorway, her tall, graceful form silhouetted against the emergency lights. The Altarian's skin had a natural luminescence that pulsed with her emotions, and right now she was glowing bright blue with urgency. Miss Chen, she said, Dr. Morkan gave me your message. If you know something that can help us, now is the time. Zara stood up, feeling the dampening field weaken as she did. The ships are hidden in dimensional pockets throughout the galaxy. Kalen created storage spaces that exist slightly outside normal reality. Only someone with the genetic markers can access them. How do we reach these locations? We don't go to them, Zara explained, walking out of the cell. We call them to us. As they moved through the corridors, Zara could see the battle raging outside. Devourer's ships were dark silhouettes against the stars, their weapons turning Council vessels into expanding clouds of debris. The galaxy's most advanced fleet was being destroyed with terrifying efficiency. They reached the command hub to find chaos. Supreme Hierarch Vexthul was screaming orders that no one could follow. The tactical situation was hopeless, and everyone knew it. Report, Counselor Ylandra demanded. We've lost 60% of the defense fleet, came the reply. Enemy weapons are disrupting our ships at the quantum level. Our shields and armor might as well be made of paper. Commander Thexara noticed Zara and reached for her weapon, but found her hand wouldn't obey her commands. The human prisoner has escaped. She's here by my authority, Ylandra declared. Miss Chen, show us these ships of yours. Zara walked to the central command console. The moment she touched it, every screen in the room lit up with new information. She reached out through the galaxy's communication networks, calling to the hidden vessels that had waited 3,000 years for this moment. Throughout Council space, reality began to ripple. Dimensional pockets that had been invisible for millennia suddenly became visible as massive ships phased into normal space. The vessels were unlike anything in the current galaxy's fleets. They seem to be made of crystallized starlight and quantum possibility. By the ancients, breathed one of the technicians. How many ships are there? Zara's consciousness expanded as she interfaced more deeply with the network. 317 combat vessels, each one designed specifically to counter Devourer technology. And they'll only respond to humans? Vexthul demanded. To awakened humans, Zara corrected. People whose genetic potential has been activated. Supreme Hierarch Vexthul's face went through a range of expressions. Anger, fear, resignation, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. How many awakened humans are there? Right now? About 50,000 across the galaxy, but that number is growing every minute. The tactical display showed Kalen's ships moving to engage the Devourer fleet. Where Council vessels had been destroyed in seconds, these ancient human ships stood their ground. Their weapons seemed to rewrite the laws of physics around their targets, causing Devourer ships to simply cease to exist. Impossible, Commander Thexara whispered. How can 3,000-year-old ships be more advanced than our current technology? Because Kalen didn't build them using normal engineering, Zara explained. He used consciousness itself as a construction material. These ships are as much alive as they are mechanical. Dr. Morkan had arrived in the command hub and was studying the displays with fascination. The quantum signatures are extraordinary. It's like the ships exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As they watched, more awakened humans throughout the galaxy began reaching the hidden vessels. Zara could feel their minds connecting with the ship consciousness, forming a network that spanned star systems. Each human pilot brought their own unique perspective and abilities to the fleet, but the Devourers were adapting too. Their ships began changing configuration, developing new weapons and defenses in real time. The battle that had seemed one-sided began to balance out. They learned fast, Zara observed grimly. Kalen's ships are powerful, but the Devourers have consumed entire galaxies. They've seen every possible type of warfare. So what do we do? Ylandra asked. Zara closed her eyes and reached out through the network of awakened minds. Somewhere in the collective consciousness she could feel an echo of Kalen himself, not his living presence but the pattern he had left behind in humanity's genetic code. We do what humans do best, she said, opening her eyes with determination. We adapt faster than they can keep up with. The real battle for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity would show the universe what they were truly capable of when they stopped holding back. But first, Zara had to convince the Council to trust the very people they had spent millennia trying to suppress. The battle raged for 6 hours before the truth became clear to everyone in the command hub. The Devourer fleet was learning faster than Kalen's ships could adapt. Every human tactic was quickly copied and countered. Every weapon configuration was met with perfect defenses. We're losing, Commander Thexara reported grimly. 17 of the ancient ships have been destroyed. The Devourers are pushing deeper into Council space. Zara stood at the central console, her consciousness spread across the galactic network of awakened humans. She could feel their determination, their fear, and their growing understanding of what they faced. The Devourers weren't just another alien species. They were a force that had consumed countless civilizations across multiple galaxies. There has to be something we're missing, she muttered, diving deeper into the genetic memories that Kalen had left behind. He wouldn't have prepared for 3,000 years just to fail now. Dr. Morkan approached her carefully. Zara, perhaps the answer isn't in fighting them directly. Kalen was known for finding solutions that others couldn't see. Supreme Hierarch Vexthul, who had been silent for the past hour, finally spoke. If we're going to die, I want to understand something first. Why did your ancestor spare the Council 3 millennia ago? He could have destroyed us completely. Zara turned to look at him, and for a moment her eyes held depths that seemed far older than her years, because destroying you would have been the easy way. The weak way. Kalen saw potential in the Council. He saw what you could become if you chose cooperation over conquest. But we disappointed him, Counselor Ylandra said softly. We became afraid of human potential and tried to suppress it. Fear makes people do terrible things, Zara replied. But it doesn't make them evil, just limited. As she spoke, something shifted in her understanding. The genetic memories weren't just about technology and warfare. They were about philosophy, about the difference between domination and leadership. That's it, she breathed, her eyes widening with realization. The Devourers can copy our technology, our tactics, even our abilities. But there's one thing they can't copy. What? Demanded Commander Thexara. Hope, trust, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Zara turned to the communication systems. I need to speak to every awakened human in the fleet. She opened a channel that connected her directly to the consciousness of every human pilot in the ancient ships. When she spoke, her words carried across the galaxy instantaneously. Listen to me, everyone. The Devourers are winning because we're fighting them on their terms. They expect conquest, domination, the strong destroying the weak. But that's not who we are. That's not who Kaylin was. Through the network, she could feel confusion from some of the pilots. They were in desperate combat, watching friends die as Devourer ships closed in on core council worlds. I know you're scared, Zara continued. I know it looks hopeless. But remember why we're here. We're not fighting to conquer or to prove we're better than anyone else. We're fighting to protect people who were afraid of us, to save civilizations that treated us like we were inferior. On the tactical display, something remarkable began to happen. The human ships stopped trying to match the Devourers' increasingly aggressive tactics. Instead, they began moving to shield council vessels, protecting alien colonies, rescuing crew members from destroyed ships even when it put them at greater risk. The Devourer fleet slowed, their adaptation algorithms struggling with this new pattern. They had consumed countless civilizations, but they had never encountered a species that became more effective by choosing protection over aggression. Now, Zara whispered into the network, show them what Kaylin really understood. Show them what humans can do when we work together. Across the galaxy, awakened humans began linking their consciousness not just with their ships, but with each other. The network that had connected them individually suddenly became something greater, a collective mind that spanned star systems while still preserving individual identity. The ancient ships began moving in perfect coordination, their quantum weapons creating interference patterns that disrupted the Devourers' ability to adapt. But more importantly, they began doing something the Devourers had never seen before. They began sacrificing themselves to save others. Human pilots rammed their ships into Devourer vessels to protect Council colonies. They used their ships' quantum cores as weapons, knowing it would destroy them but save thousands of alien lives. They chose certain death to give others a chance to live. And with each act of sacrifice, something changed in the quantum fabric around the battlefield. The Devourer's technology, based on consumption and survival at any cost, began to break down when faced with its opposite. Their adaptation algorithms couldn't process a strategy based on willing self-destruction for the benefit of others. Impossible, Commander Thexara breathed, watching the tactical display. The Devourer ships are retreating? It was true. The dark fleet that had seemed unstoppable was pulling back from the core systems. Their ships were flickering, losing cohesion as their quantum foundations were disrupted by forces their creators had never imagined. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 317 ancient ships, only 43 remained. Thousands of awakened humans had given their lives to save a galaxy that had never truly accepted them. Zara felt each loss like a physical blow. These weren't just statistics. They were people she had been connected to, minds she had touched across the void of space. Why? Supreme Hierarch Vexthal asked quietly. Why did they sacrifice themselves for us? Because that's what Kaylin taught us, Zara replied, tears streaming down her face. That true strength isn't about being able to destroy your enemies. It's about being willing to die for people who might not even like you. Dr. Morkan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. My dear, what you've all done today, it's beyond heroic. You've saved the galaxy, have we? Zara asked, wiping her eyes. The Devourers are retreating, but they're not destroyed. They'll adapt eventually. They'll find a way to counter even sacrifice. Counselor Yelandra stepped forward. Then we'll have to make sure they never get the chance. The galaxy needs to change. No more suppression of human potential. No more treating any species as inferior. Supreme Hierarch Vexthal looked around the command hub at the faces of his fellow council members. Fear was being replaced by something he hadn't seen in his people for generations. Humility. Miss Chen, he said formally. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our sincere apology for the way your people have been treated. And I would like to ask, would you be willing to help us build something better? Zara looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? A new kind of council, one based on cooperation instead of hierarchy, one where every species contributes their unique strengths instead of being ranked by how long they've been members. Through the network of surviving awakened humans, Zara could feel their response to this offer. Hope mixed with caution, trust earned through shared sacrifice. We'll help, she said finally, but not as subjects or junior members, as equals. Agreed, Vexthul said without hesitation. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways that would have seemed impossible before the Devourer invasion. The ancient facilities left by Kalen became centers of learning where humans and aliens worked together to understand consciousness, technology, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. Zara found herself at the center of these changes. No longer an ignored archive worker, but a bridge between species. She established academies on dozens of worlds where the awakened taught others about the potential that lay dormant in every thinking mind. The Devourers were gone, driven back to the void between galaxies, but their legacy lived on in the unity they had accidentally created. The galaxy learned that its greatest strength lay not in the dominance of any single species, but in the willingness of all species to protect each other. And deep in the ancient archives, new records were being written. Not in the languages of conquest and suppression, but in the universal language of hope. The story of how a galaxy learned to trust, and how humanity finally came home to the stars not as conquerors, but as friends. Kalen's true legacy wasn't the technology he had left behind or the battles he had won. It was the simple truth that the strongest force in the universe wasn't the power to destroy, but the courage to sacrifice everything for others. The Council had once ridiculed Zara's unknown lineage. Now they understood that her heritage was not just human, but universal. She was a descendant not just of Kalen the Conqueror, but of everyone who had ever chosen hope over fear, cooperation over domination, love over power. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all.